Hello and welcome to today's group coaching. And yeah, today's topic is Cbetting in limp pods heads up versus tough regulars. Okay, so the higher you get in the limits, the tougher your regulars will be, and they might figure it out like quite quickly that you have too high of a c-bet, and they might adapt uh, according to it, right? And if you feel uncomfortable, like adapting, readapting, etc., then you might want to actually like know the theory how to construct a proper GTO c-betting range on the flop. I think this is a topic we actually probably never really talked about. It's not really unnecessary, but I think it's good to know how to do it. Like if you have no clue, how to do it on your own. So how I work in these kind of spots. So yeah, I want to construct like a balanced c-betting range on the flop, and how do I proceed with this? And I think like this is an quite interesting graph. So if you click on the check here, just here, then you see the graph. How here you see it like quite visually how often you actually check in limped pods, right? So I mean, you can take a look here, but it has like a less, yeah, not so great visuality. So here you see that actually there are just a couple of boards, like compared to all of these boards here, where we have in theory a super high c-betting range in the limp pot. And these are, if you take a look now here on the right side, these are mainly like ace high boards. And yeah, it's quite easy to play. Just c-bet and go from there. Your c-betting range. Yeah, these are, I mean, all of them are actually like ace high boards, right? And as soon as it isn't an ace high board anymore, then you start checking quite frequently. And most of the time, your checking frequency is even over 50%. It never gets like over 70%, but it's rarely going under 50% actually. And I think at the moment, our c-betting frequency is still like at around like 75%. And it's not well constructed still, right? So we're doing some things like maybe checking back a couple of top pair weak kickers, maybe a couple of like mid pairs, maybe a couple of ace highs, etc. But actually, I think basically none of us, or I mean, I have a little bit of a clue, but it's also not like my expertise. But yeah, like not too much theory here, right? How an actual checkbacking frequency, checkbacking range should look like. And yeah, so I think it's like worth looking at it, especially if you know that theory-wise you should have mainly checks on most of the boards, or at least like half and half. So what I do is normally I pick a board where I see regulars check raising quite frequently. And I think like this is one of the boards. So if you have someone who has like a very high check raising frequency, they are using these kind of boards here quite frequently. It's very easy to find like pretty good check raises. Like a lot of backdoor stuff is possible here. Like basically every 7x is a decent check raise. A lot of backdoor flush draws, etc. So even a couple of mid pairs, bottom pairs. So this would be one of the boards where I would like to implement a couple of checks. Yeah, Matthias, what would be the hands that you would check back here, or what you think should get checked here on this kind of flop structure?
Yeah, I never really thought about this topic,
Hmm.
so
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean
like
it's
you
great.
said in the
It's new
introduction.
knowledge.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, because there are definitely some regulars who are check raising all the time against
Hmm.
high frequencies. Um, so yeah, I definitely check back some pairs here. So pairs that don't want to get check raised probably, and also some weak pairs with weak kickers. So like weak queens, for example.
Hmm.
A lot of sixes are checks for me. Fives, I'm still c-betting quite often because I want to deny equity against overcards, but I could think, or I think that in GTO they are also often checks.
Hmm.
But I'm just not sure about the total misses here. So like, do we check a hand like 10 deuce off? I'm
Hmm.
not sure. I could imagine that we are checking hand that don't have any equity, like we when we even don't have a backdoor draw, for example.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, I could also think that these are good bluffs because then we have an easy decision against check raises. And
Hmm.
I mean, we just over realize our equity with our C bet, most likely, if we bet 10 deuce off on this kind of board. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure because right now I'm just C betting quite often these like total crap hands. And therefore my C betting range is for sure a little bit too weak.
Hmm.
But I don't know which weak hands to bet and which weak hands to check.
Okay, great. Then this is what we are here for, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of good points. So, what are we doing with our top pairs? What are we doing with the 6 axis, 5 axis? And what are we doing with total crap? What are we doing maybe with king highs, ace highs? And what are we doing with a hand like 10-8, like two overcards, maybe some kind of backdoor, 10-8 of hearts, 10-8 offsuit, right? So a lot of things. What are we doing with Jack 7? What are we doing with Jack 4? So yeah. And what would be your way of finding it out?
yeah. We're taking a look at the GTO ranges.
Yeah. Okay. Now you see them. So what would be your actual way to now? Yeah. Or how would you study this? This is like interesting for me.
um, yeah. So my main question was about the total air hands here. So I will just mark
Hmm.
the no mate hand area there. So I
Hmm.
only see the no mate hands. And then yeah, I study why some hands are betting and why some hands are checking. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean here you can already see yeah, pretty clearly why some hands are bets and why some hands are checks.
Hmm.
Should I
Yeah, I
should
mean
I go further
here there are
or?
also like gut shots included and these
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
hands, right? So total misses you would need to like Jack 3 might be a total miss, etc. So yeah, okay. Um, I think it's already like in the right direction. What I actually like to do is to go like from here to here and like how do I play my top range? How do I play my middling range? And how do I play my draws? And how do I play my total bullshit?
yeah,
And I like to just put up like some kind of some kind of note. I mainly do it like with pen and paper, but for this coaching, I'll do it. I will do it a little bit like this. And what I always try to do is to find patterns. So I would, if I find something that might be a pattern, I take also a look at different structures already. Okay, so for example, here I prepared um, Queen 10-6, so I might compare it, right? So I might compare how do I play top pairs here or mid pairs here when the gap is low, comparison to here when the gap is high, for example, right? So I always try to find patterns, but I will show it in one example, and then I try to write down like the main things that are important here. So maybe let's do it like this. Okay, so I start here and I see, okay, sets want to bet. Or sometimes I also take a look at the sizing. Does it make sense to actually use 2 sizings here? I think it's probably not necessary. So I will probably just stick to 1 BB to make my life easier and not have to think additional to balance my 1.5 BB and my 1 BB. So we are less vulnerable to sizing tells, which is also good. So we might give up like a tiny bit of EV like GTO wise. However, we are not exploitable, right? So they can't read something into the 1.5 BB or into the 1 BB. And naturally, someone, you have some kind of tendency to use 1 sizing if you're using 2 sizings. So maybe on some kind of board here, you would use 1.5, maybe with the 6 to do a little bit more protection, but you would like bet 1 BB with total crap, for example, right? So 1 range might be vulnerable. That's why I actually like to not use different sizings on most structures and just stick to 1. And here I will just bet 1 BB. So yeah, I go over here. Sets always want to bet. 2 pair always want to bet, and over pairs, if we have ever one, yeah, kings always want to bet. So I write or here first like the structure, queen 6-5 rainbow, and then I write 2 pair plus 100% Cbet, right? So this is like how I do it. You can also write it down, but for myself, I would just do how I feel comfortable that I can read it. I don't need to write like 2 pair. I know if I write like 2p, 2p it's enough, but here it's fine. Like 2 pair plus 100% Cbet. Okay, so it's not that we want to check back very strong hands here. And then I go to the top pairs. So this is like our top range, right? It is like top pair plus. You could also divide it like this. Top range, 2 pair plus, and then you have it a little bit more divided. And then let's take a look at the top pair. And I think we saw this in like a lot of coachings. This is what GTO is like almost always doing. He's betting the strongest top pair almost always, and is balancing it with checking back the lowest kickers at some frequency. And if I think, okay, this might be pattern, then I would look at another board and maybe another, like pretty quickly, not going into too much detail. And here, for example, you see also like sets, 2 pairs always want to bet, and top pair, it's basically the same. However, like it is going down a little bit sooner, right? So already from queen 8, but again, like this is a pattern. You could already remember this, that in the limp pot, you always want to bet your strongest one. So you don't need to check back king queen in order to balance something, or queen 10 or queen jack. They are just way too strong. They are 3 street value hands, bet on many runouts. So top pair, or like this, Cbet strongest, check back, weakest kicker. Yeah, like this, or you could also write it like this most of the time. And like the goal of all of this here is to actually have, it doesn't have, has to be like super accurate, because I won't play it like this. I would just probably Cbet up to queen 7 and then check back everything below, right? So check back the weakest ones and just Cbet the strongest ones. And this is like accurate enough. This is, the frequencies will be very on point. And yeah, so knowing this pattern is already like very good. Okay, so then I would go to the next one, and this would be the pocket pairs. And this is also a little bit of a pattern. You will recognize that if you have some kind of gap in between, like queen 6-5, then you will see that solver is betting like 7s and 8s, maybe 9s. But the higher the kicker is, and the lower need of protection, the more he will check it back, right? So jacks always check back, 10s always check back, 9s always check back. All of these hands actually are the same, right? So even equity-wise, they have almost the same equity, and it makes sense because we are bidding a 6, and our opponent shouldn't have 8x, and a queen X is beating all of these hands. So all of these hands are actually the same hands, and the only difference is the need of protection. So for 7s, every 8, 9, 10, and jack is kind of bad for us because our opponent might have outdrawn us, right? And for pocket jacks, a 10, 9, 8, and 7 isn't actually that bad because, yeah, I mean, our opponent could have now like a 2 pair, but it's not like a 1. It's not a 1 pair that now beats us. Yeah, makes sense, right?
Yeah, sure. I really like the explanation of the pocket pairs here because, yeah,
Pocket
with
pair.
pocket pairs between the top and the middle card, I think I'm quite random most of the time, either checking everything or betting everything.
Yeah,
depending on the board
you see
structure.
this. You
Yeah.
see, if you take a lot of different boards, you will see this pattern all and over again. So I think it's even fine to like check back jacks, 10s, and 9s and always see bet like 7s and 8s. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's totally fine to see bet these. We can also like always call with a check raise here, right? Yeah. PP under TP. I think it's quite clear, right? Pocket pair under top pair. Check back strongest. Cbet weakest. And then you can do something like this. Strongest don't need that much protection. Yeah, I think like it doesn't have to be like too much into detail. If you read this again, like for example, you before the session you're making a warm up and you are maybe going through your notes, then this will already remind you of the situation. So you don't need to write everything down, but just the thing that will trigger the memory, right? So strongest don't need that much protection, and then you will think about what I explained now, for example, right? And okay, so then I would go, or maybe let's take a very quick look at the queen 10 here. Here, I mean, jacks always check back, makes sense. And weak pair, you see here, for example, between the like 7s, 8s, 9s, also always want to check here actually. So yeah, if you have something like this, you want to check your pocket pairs most of the time. Maybe call one bet and then it's just a give up. They have like very, very high showdown value, but you are not really getting too much value out of betting, right? So it's not that too many worse cards can call. Sure, on the flop maybe, but then you will check back and then your opponent is bluffing and you have always a pretty bad bluff catcher. So it's like better to just check it back and play it like passively. Maybe calling once, keep the small the pot small, and they might be a value bet on turn or river, right? So it's fine to check back, maybe bet turn or bet river, or just check down, depending on the run out. Okay, so mid pair. And yeah, here's also like one pattern that you will always see with the mid pairs, or at least like very, very often. And actually, yeah, I mean, it's that you always want or almost always want to bet your strongest mid pair, especially with overcards. It doesn't have to be an overcard, but overcards are good to have. Why, Matthias? Why is it good to have like an overcut here with the Cbet?
You can hit better 2 pairs, for example. And
So for example, our opponent has queen 5, then we still have like decent equity, right?
yeah.
Maybe one additional point you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, we have outs to the top pair. But I mean, it doesn't really matter, right?
It
Because,
doesn't really matter. Yeah, it is like a little bit tricky, but think about the range that our opponent is calling on the flop.
Yeah, okay. I mean, our opponent can surely call some king highs and ace highs, which we are dominating them, because if our
Yeah,
opponent hits an
highly,
ace or
heavily.
a king, we have a 2 pair and he only has a top pair then.
Exactly. So we are creating a positive setup in our favor. So he's calling king highs and ace highs, and first we are getting value out of them, right? So they will also not bluff the river normally, king highs and ace highs. But if we hit, it is like an awesome situation for us because our opponent will have hit the card as well relatively frequently, like a little bit less frequently because of the blocker effects, but still, like the king is one of the most cards like our opponent's calling. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, king highs are calling like relatively frequently, like not too much, but with the backdoor flush draw, and like king 9 should call, king 8 should call at some frequency here, etc., etc. Ace highs as well. So yeah, like these are the two reasons why we should like always bet. The third reason is our opponent can call with 6x's, and 6x's are not going to raise that frequently, right? So with a6 to jack6, we have like, or even 10-6, we have pretty clear value bet on the flop. Our opponent is calling 5x's and weaker 6x's. With 7-6, it is getting closer. We're getting called by 5x's, but our opponent now also has a lot of better 6x's. So yeah, so we want to bet like the strongest ones, and a couple with like these ones with the backdoor flush draw. And there's an additional point why it is also pretty cool to actually check this one's down, and this is that it is not too bad to actually face an overcard, because like 6-7, 8-6, and 9-6, all of these hands on a 6-7, on a 7, 8, and 9 is actually not that bad of cards for us, because we have then like a third pair plus gutshot or plus open and straight draw. So we will continue on basically every turn to every sizing. So it is totally fine to check back these and to see bet these ones here. One thing I very often see, and some guys of you are doing, is to not c-bet mid pairs at all. Okay, like checking back too often, and I think this is like a mistake. So you should still have 6x's in your c-betting range, as well as 5x's in your c-betting range. However, you also should check them back at some frequency. And here it is like, again, a little bit like the top pairs, but not that extreme. So you will see bet the ones with the overcards. So mid pair is c-bet strongest, especially with overcards to top pair. King ace highs. It's like maybe a little bit complicated, but this doesn't matter too much. Yeah, and the weakest ones actually, right? And these are with the backdoor flush draw. Yeah, okay, it is like with the backdoor flush draw. Let's not make it like too complicated. It's totally fine to check these back, for example, or to c-bet them. But it is already better than like better done than perfect, right? So it is okay to already have this implemented in your game, for example. You don't need, like, you can make like this battle tweaks like in the end if you're when you're experienced with most of the basic stuff, then you can get maybe a little bit more into the details. But knowing this is already like very, very powerful. Yeah. Check back middle kicker and cbet low kicker plus backdoor flush draw, something like this. Okay, some question until now, Matthias?
Yeah, I would just take a look at the other board structure. So I would be interested in, yeah, up to which kicker we are betting and which we are checking.
Yeah, very, very good question. So middle pair. This is like a little bit rare actually, that you won't see like too much betting with the ace 10 and king 10, but still like at the decent frequency, right? So yeah, I mean ace 10, king 10 also don't need like so much protection here. And if you bet 1BB, yeah, king highs are calling, ace highs are calling. So yeah, I still think it's fine. What about the check raising here? It's 8%. Here it's 12%. Okay. Oh, whoops. Okay. Yeah, mid pair. It is like a little bit more random. He's just taking it, betting like everything at some frequency. And the reason here is a little bit that, yeah, I mean, 10-9, 10-8, 10-7 actually makes some sense to check back, right? Because it is a little bit more like the situation I talked about here, that like the 8, 9, and 7 are not that bad if you have 10-9, 10-8, 10-7. But they are also like undercards, right? So yeah, mainly checking the mid pair and just betting. I don't know why he's preferring diamonds, as if like diamond is stronger than spades, or okay, diamond is no, yeah, 10-8 of clubs is also a backdoor flush draw. Yeah, no clue why he's preferring these. It's probably kind of random. But yeah, you see like betting more often than checking, like a tiny bit. Ace 10 almost always betting, and Jack 10 almost always checking. So yeah, all of these are just betting with around 25% frequency, and 75% they are checking. So smart checking, basically. Not too much value in betting for 3 streets at least. And yeah, so going into defensive mode with the 10x's here.
Yeah, how would you write it down? Like, for example, if you are holding a mid pair with an undercard, then we are more willing to check back. Something like this?
Yeah, I would probably write it like simple, like checking most of the time, betting sometimes. Like betting 25% of the time is like a little bit hard to like implement. So I wouldn't mind if you would make it like more practical and see bet like Jack 10 plus, or maybe 10-9 plus and check back the rest, if it makes sense. Then from the frequencies you would be like quite yeah, you would be quite good. Or maybe Jack 10 plus, because I think like these ones are actually pretty good checks here at the 100% frequency, like the ones in between. And these ones I don't see like too much value in betting actually. Why? Because yeah, it's hard to get called by worse, or by a lot of worse hands. So yeah, checking back these and these and betting these, I think makes a lot of sense here. So sometimes I don't want to like replicate and make it maybe already a little bit more playable, right? So going a little bit with some kind of logic. Yeah. But yeah, if I would write it down, then I would probably write something like Cbet Jack 10 plus and check back the rest, or check back most of the time. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah, I
not
mean,
like super specific.
yeah, sure. But I just try to understand why we are checking more often with the mid pair here. And one reason is probably because we just need to protect less, right?
Yeah. You see this quite frequently, that the higher the gap here is between the top pair and the mid pair, the more often you will see bet the mid pair, because it needs way more protection.
Yeah, exactly.
And the 10x doesn't need too much protection here, because there are a lot of zero equity hands here actually. Two undercards without any gut shot or whatever are basically zero equity hands with a 10.
Yeah.
And here, like basically every hand has at least one overcard to the 6. Or a gut shot, or yeah, I mean, if it doesn't has at least one overcard, it is a gut shot or an open and straight draw. So yeah, every hand has decent, I mean, decent, quote unquote, decent equity with the 6, but there are a lot of hands that have zero equity with the 10.
Yeah.
Right. So it is naturally that we want to see bet less frequently with the 10x, but we should still have see bets in our range. Also, like we should also see bet 10x's. Also, if you have a board structure like King, Queen, 6, then I see some guys are like always checking the Queen, and this is like kind of suicidal. And especially if they are always betting the king, because then if they check back, you can go nuts with your king x, and your opponent has tons of queen x's, because this is like the most natural check back, and they will always call the turn and maybe call down, depending on the run out. So like also like on a king queen something, you should balance with checking back a couple of king x's and c betting a couple of queen x's, that you're not like dead with the check back, or like always in a difficult situation. You will face, like, if your opponent understands the game, he will use proper sizings, bets, over bets, pot bets, and it will be hard to defend. And you will always be in a lot of like really ugly situations with your mid pair bullshit kicker, etc. But if you know, okay, I'm checking back a ton of king axes here and actually c betting like my strongest queen axes, then you are confident that you have enough hands to call down here. You are calling down your king x no kicker and your strongest, and maybe a couple of queen x's, and you don't need to call like always down and call down like bullshit hands. So you are better, better suited for like aggression from your opponent. Yeah. So that's why you shouldn't go like too extreme. Not like always check back your 6 or always check back your 5s here. And yeah, because you see also, if you go to the weak pairs, to the 5 axis, it is the same pattern here, almost the same pattern. And yeah, betting ace 5 and king 5 most of the time, even a couple of jack 5s, but you're checking back most of the weakest ones here, or almost all of the weakest ones. So they are relatively high equity hands, like 60%, but they will realize the equity very, very poorly, even in position. So we're just betting like the strongest ones and checking back the weakest ones.
Yeah, one question about this.
Mm-hmm.
Is this today purely about GTO, or are we also thinking about, yeah, if we should implement this or not? Because you are often saying we
Mm-hmm.
should still see that low bottom pairs because we want to deny equity against overcards.
Yeah, I mean, having a 5x here and a 6x doesn't make a difference, at least not too much, right? So for denying equity, a 6x has to deny equity as much as a 5x. So if there's like a big gap in between, it's totally fine to see bet 100% with guys who will just play randomly and normally and never check raise, etc., etc., etc. But if you are facing like a very tough opponent, then you should at least know what kind of hands you should check back here in theory, right? So that you are not like randomly making a strategy, and then you will make mistakes because it is just too random, because you are maybe checking back all of your air hands because you think he's check raising too much. Maybe he's check raising too much, and it is like the best play to now check back all of your air hands. But it is like then you are in a game of chicken and you don't know where you are, right? And then it's the question like, will he do a mistake, or will you do the mistake? And you could just go and at least know the theory, and then how to implement it if needed, right? Or at least like the some kind of yeah, that you have some kind of clue how to play it balanced. Also to have like a better range understanding if your opponent is more on the GTO side, right? So that you see, for example, his mistakes or his yeah, where he might deviate from the strategy. If someone is, for example, checking back like ace five here, this is already yeah, this already means something, right? Because he should always bet it here, for example, or if he's betting 7-5, 5-4, 5-3, then he has less 5x's in his checkbacking range, for example, right? So I think it's always good to have like the theoretical knowledge of the baseline, and to actually be able to execute a somewhat balanced strategy. Doesn't mean that you should implement it in a way that you should always use it. No, that's not what I propose. However, like checking back 5x's actually makes a lot of sense. Like equity denial is not. I mean, it is cool, but it is not like the thing we always want to accomplish when we have like a 5, because if you're checking back, it's not that your opponent is always hitting or betting, and you can still go for a delay or bluff catch or bet at some at a different street. So yeah, it really also like player dependent. I wouldn't like always bet my 5 and my 6 here with everyone. This is I'm not playing this kind of strategy. So I have checks. Yeah, I'm playing this actually probably quite frequently. But with the recreational who normally dongs, I would just bet all of my 5x's, and I would check back a lot of my 10x's here still, right? Because they will just fold almost always, and we don't need too much protection. So it's still like logic, but like denying equity is not the only logic here on this kind of structure. Yeah, do you have an additional question to yeah, to this topic?
No.
Okay. So I mean, your strategy at the moment, you said you will check back a couple of 6x's, but you will see bet all of the 5x's.
No, no. I mean, against recreationists, yeah, but against regulars, I'm checking way more pairs here. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm implementing this or implemented this as well, like often just betting the pairs with the best kicker and checking the pair with the weaker kickers. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really good to have a calling range on the turn if we check back, and then we are not always holding air, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
our opponent probes, and a lot of regulars are probing quite frequently, then we want to have a calling range. So it's really nice to have some top pairs, mid
Yeah,
pairs, and so on.
I agree. I agree to that, and it also has a couple of other benefits, that your opponent might hit something that he might call you off. Otherwise, he would fold. Like a top pair, no kicker doesn't need too much protection, but it's also not a 3 street value hand. So why not check the flop? It makes like a lot of sense from all perspectives, I think. Okay. So weak pair is basically the same as mid pair.
Yeah, and I really liked to split this, like, yeah, calling, betting and checking
Mm-hmm.
pairs and with different kickers for sure. But um, I often see some people always betting or always checking, and I think that's not good. Also on other board
Yeah.
structures, like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes on a drawy board structure, they just check everything, and because yeah, our fold equity is low, but that doesn't mean we can have some bluffs, for example, with
Yeah, we
backdoors,
should.
right? So
I mean, we want to bet some hands for value, so we
yeah,
want to have
exactly.
some bluffs as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think this is one common mistake a lot of
Mm-hmm.
yeah players are doing.
I think it's like it doesn't have too much impact on like the low stakes. But I think the higher you get, the more capable your opponents are, and the more they can maybe also find this out and attack on a couple of boards very very aggressively, where they sense that you are like always weak when checking, etc. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let's continue with the ace highs. And yeah, actually, like I personally struggle a lot to find like a pattern here. It almost always feels like pretty random what the solver is doing with the ace highs. Sometimes I have a clue, like, but yeah, it is kind of yeah. Again, but let's try find out. So I think it's very important or very interesting to see that he's like always betting ace king. And yeah, it is a little bit like betting ace six and king six. So our opponent, it's value bet. It's value bet. We just have like 52% equity, but still our opponent is calling ace highs, king highs, and we still have like two overcards, so we can outdraw our opponent even if he has a queen. We have like 6 clean outs, which is like pretty cool to have. So it makes a lot of sense to actually bet ace king here, and I see a lot of guys checking back ace king here. Yeah, which I like would recommend. And it also makes total sense for like ace jack ace 10, because it has a lot of like showdown value, and it's also I mean it's not too much difference between like ace jack and ace 8 here, right? But he's betting like ace 8 way more frequently, ace 9, ace 7, and ace deuce to ace 4. So yeah, maybe you have a clue why this is the case. I still haven't found it out, like actually, to be honest.
Yeah, I also don't have a clue. Like, I mean, also with king highs here, I mean, it's quite similar. I mean, king high is a little bit weaker, but yeah, my problem with these hands is that yeah, I always feel like I'm too passive if I'm checking it here because then I don't have a clue on turn and river because
Hmm.
with ace high, yeah, in theory we have showdown value, but if we try to check it down at some street, our opponent will bet most of the time, like on
Hmm.
flop, turn, or river. I mean, he didn't bet on flop, but he can bet on turn and river, and then I'm always not really sure if I'm probably playing ace high and king high too weak. So yeah,
Hmm.
I already don't have a clue on the flop.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it makes a little bit sense to check back like ace 10 as jack, because if we are hitting a 10 or a jack, we have like a pretty strong mid pair, and we are dominating a couple of hands from our opponent. So yeah, checking back and like keeping his 10 axis and jack axis in his range makes a lot of sense. Right? So if we are checking back, he's yeah, he still has like 10-9. If we are betting the flop, he's folding 10-9. So is it good to fold out 10-9? I don't think so. So we should keep it in, especially like for the cases where we both hit a 10. I think we can get quite a lot of value from these hands. But then, yeah, I mean, ace 9.
We have backdoor straights. I mean, that would be an argument, probably.
Yeah.
And blocking draws, I mean, our fold equity is probably a little bit higher, but
I mean,
does
it
it
is
matter that
a little
much?
bit easier to figure out what kind of ace highs to bet on like if they're like two hearts, like on flush drawy structures, then you have more of a pattern here. But you see it also here that it is indifferent. So even the solver doesn't know what to do here. So he's just making it like a frequency play and just betting, like checking most of the time, but betting sometimes. So these hands are indifferent in like betting and checking. And it doesn't make a difference EV wise, but if you want to be like perfectly balanced, you should probably bet sometimes and check sometimes to have it like in both ranges, ace axis in the checking range and in the betting range, but checking a little bit more frequently than betting. It might be fine to just use like a 50% RNG with these ones. So if you want to do it, I think it is
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, nothing you have to implement. It's interesting that the solver wants to bet like ace nine of spades a little bit more often. But yeah, overall he's checking most of the backdoor flush draws with the ace highs. So yeah, let's go let's go on. I think like you might you might note that you want to bet like ace highs with overcards to the top pair. So this would be one thing you see very often. And now, yeah, let's go to the no mate hands. And yeah, where do we want to start? I would say let's start with the king highs. And you see this also very often. And yeah, I mean king highs want to check down super frequently. And yeah, it is just a hand that can actually go down to showdown quite often and win. And it has like one overcard to the top pair, and it is like it's just a thing like the solver is doing. Like betting doesn't has too much value except like equity denying, right? However, like if you take a look at the kicker, like all of the hands, all of the kickers when we hit it, right? So if there's a seven on the turn and we have king seven, we have the best seven. If there's a nine on the turn, we have king nine, it is the best nine. So it makes a lot of sense to actually check them back to create like positive setups with these kind of kickers. And you see that he is actually like the solver is actually betting like a couple of weaker ones, like the king four. Yeah, it has an additional like backdoor straight draw. It wants to bet sometimes, so it is denying a couple. Yeah, it is folding out a couple of these hands here. Yeah, so king highs mainly want to check back. You want to add something or ask something?
No. I mean, this confirms my theory of like, yeah, checking ace high and king highs most of the time, but then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not having a clue on the turn. I mean, we probably don't want to invest more money if we don't improve, right?
I mean, yeah, you're checking back. There's like yeah, let's say a deuce, and our opponent is like pot betting. We are not going to call
Yeah, sure.
a lot of king highs, I think. Why is he so slow? Yeah, and yeah, I mean he should bet polar, and if you're betting polar, like all of the king highs are folding.
Mm.
So yeah, we are not
And
really
against a
investing.
check?
We will check. We'll never bet them.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. This is like how I'm playing it, but it,
This is how it
yeah.
should be played. And
Yeah,
also
okay.
like if you check and there's like this is always going to showdown. Like even on a jack, um, it is check and it will get checked, right? So this is always a check. You
Yeah,
just
okay.
have like if you take a look at the EV, the EV of betting is just way lower. You have a pretty high EV in check back. It's like 0.52 552. In a 2BB pot, it is like a quarter. Yeah, I mean, this is actually the equity, right? The EV is the equity, yeah, multiplied with the pot. So 25% of the time we are winning. It is pretty decent, pretty decent. 2 and 25% at showdown with the check, 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 check. Or at least if it goes check, check on the river after you check twice before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely reassuring because, yeah, sometimes I feel like, this feels wrong. Just checking it down. I know I have some kind of showdown value, but then at the same time, I also feel like, okay, maybe my opponents are bluffing too often, or yeah.
Nah, they're probably not. I mean, on the higher stakes, this will feel natural because everyone is just doing it. Like it is solver approved, and it just makes a lot of sense. Very, very often, just the queen highs and the ace highs just want to check down, and because not always, I mean, he's not always betting all of his shitty hands, because if he would, then you would just, I mean, with the bet, you're calling king highs here quite frequently, probably, at least at some frequency, you should call king highs. But our opponent also shouldn't, actually he should bet. He should bet his queen highs here, because a couple of king highs are folding. Quite a lot of betting going on here.
Yeah, especially the 5Xs.
With two checks. Yeah, I mean 5x is just a value bet. 6x just a value bet here. And Jack X as well. So Queen High. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Jack High now is a value bet. So Queen High becomes the new Jack High. It is now a weak hand. If you put in like a 9 here, Queen Highs might actually not bet the river that frequently. Actually, they are still
Yeah,
betting
the
the
queen is a
river
top
quite
pair here.
frequently. Oh, I apologize. Okay, I thought it is queen high, so it is the top pair. Obviously, it is betting. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. But even like a couple of jack highs are not betting here, right? So it's not that you're bluffing like everything here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so king high check back most of the time. Or check back always, except weakest kicker. Yeah, under bottom pair. So something like this. Like if you check back king high here always, it's totally fine. And you see it as well for the jack high with the back to flush draws. They will as well check back because they have some showdown value, some showdown value as well. So if it goes like check, 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 you will win actually with jack 10 at showdown and with jack 9 at showdown. You might bluff it on a couple of cards. Yeah, on a king, for example, on a king on a river, I probably bluffing my jack highs, maybe not. But yeah, I mean, one of the main reasons is I have a lot of king highs in my check backing range, right? So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, but now let's go for a couple of draws. Not too many possible here. Open straight draws. Yeah, you're checking some. Understandable. Like betting all of them with the backdoor flush draw, checking some without the backdoor flush draw, and it is like 50-50 with the weakest ones. It's okay. I think I'm mixing it as well because I think they are also played super good in a delay pot. So just checking back and then delaying, but it's also totally fine to bet. You can call check raises. You can second barrel very often. You can actually second barrel like always. However, still like having them in a checkmate range is fine as well. But it doesn't matter too much. Not really too many combinations here. Like flush draws on flush draw boards are a little bit more interesting. Yeah, same for the gut shot. Like always betting gut shots with the back to flush draw. But also checking back quite a lot of gut shots. I think it's also cool. These are hands actually. Like if you're checking back, these might hands that are good for a check bet line. Maybe he's using them for this kind of for this kind of play. Let's see if this is a thing.
Yeah, maybe even raise against a probe, right?
Possible. Okay, let's see if he's ever raising. Nah, not too much. Also not with support bet, I guess. Yeah, gutshots are just folding the weakest ones, but with check, actually they still check back quite often. Probably check betting. Let's see. Ace on the river. Yeah, always betting like your non-mate no mate hands, so they're going into a check bet. But also like on, yeah, always betting them on the river actually, right? So a couple of gut shots are just going into a check bet line here. Make some sense. Okay, so 2-card backdoor flush draws. Yeah, king highs and queen highs. Just yeah, and even 10 highs. Almost always check. But the weakest ones super frequently bad, right? So the 7-2 suited, 6-2 suited, 6-4 suited, and this is already in the region. No, sorry, this is like a mid pair. Yeah, so mid pairs and backdoor flush draws are actually very high frequency bets. And 5x's with the backdoor flush draw are also very high frequency bets, and just checking the weakest ones at some frequency. So this is also interesting. Draw, or maybe, yeah, 2-card backdoor flush draw plus pair, high c-bet frequency.
Yeah, it's basically a bluff with equity, more or less, right? I mean,
yeah, it is some kind of mix. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like this kind of hands. Yeah, and here it also makes a lot of sense to actually check back a lot of these. They have a little bit of short-term potential, maybe not like the 10 highs, but a little bit. But they play well on many turns. So if you have like a jack 8 of hearts, you are playing fine on hard turns, etc., etc., etc. So it makes sense to actually check back these. So if there's like a runner hearts or runner diamonds, you have flushes in your range. So yeah. Yeah, but betting like all of the, yeah, I mean, these are also plus gut shots, right? We had this already. So the super low equity, yeah, 3 to suited is betting sometimes, not too often. It's also some kind of gut shot, right? There's not too much air. So yeah, you might say that if you have additional equity, so a pair or some kind of draw, it is betting, but otherwise it is chatting. It is actually checking quite frequently, also with the ace highs, king highs, and jack highs. So yeah, now let's go to the total crap. Total air. I have to make it quite quickly because I've yeah, a talk in 5 minutes. Yeah, that would be a upside for a video, right? we talked about it a little bit. Okay, so no mate hands. Okay, you see you see some pattern here. So what are no mate hands with like total air hands? Jack 4, Jack 3, 10-4, 9-4. So a lot of 4x's want to bet and 3x's want to bet, but also, yeah, this makes sense to check back. So 10 deuce, you ask about 10 deuce. 10 deuce actually doesn't want to bet too frequently. However, 9 does. 9 deuce does want to bet. 8 deuce and 7 deuce want to bet. So I think, yeah, I actually think they are betting at, what's like the frequency here? What's like the frequency? Yeah, it is like 40% bets. However, like 60% checks, but you're checking like all of these. So they're betting in a relatively high frequency, but check back also at some frequency, right? So yeah, mixing. I think if you're betting like at what I did when I had like a lot of reg walls and higher limits is just putting 50% of the time, like my total air hands, just betting at 50% of the time, and I think I was quite balanced. And I think it is like kind of good like rule of thumb that if you have like no equity on a draw on a very dry structure, you can just go for like a 50% frequency bet. Yeah, like betting sometimes, checking sometimes. I think like here you can do a lot of like exploit actually in one or the other direction, like depending on your opponent's like yeah, fold with c-bet frequency, check raising frequency, etc., etc., etc. If you have to stay balanced, then you actually want to just bet them at around 50%, because on many structures you want to have zero equity bluffs on a turn. Otherwise you would lag bluffs completely, and so you need a couple of bets here, right? With these kind of hands here. Yeah. Do you have a question?
No.
Around 50% c-bet frequency with air. And I mean, the reason is why air, this already shows me that he can't meet the minimum defense frequency. So 1 BB and he's folding 38%. Otherwise, but he just should fold like 33%, right? Or even, yeah, around that. So we have already like additional 5% fold equity. However, we want to still be balanced. Otherwise, the raising frequency could go up to like 100%, and therefore also want to play kind of balance. It's also important for future streets. Like if you're betting like too much of your air hands, and you're betting too much of your air hands on a turn and on the river, then you might get also yeah, very unbalanced on future streets. However, like the main point for this coaching was like to show how I am actually going through these kind of spots and trying to find like patterns. And very often it improves also my kind of thinking logically about a lot of situations, because the solver is actually quite logical. He's doing a lot of crazy shit, but very often it just makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I wrap it up for today. I think it was quite interesting. And yeah, see you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.